my lovely panelists here.
Okay. Obina, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. And I will be speaking about how separation of the family actually affects the childhood development. And actually, not only does it affect the childhood development, but can also trickle into adulthood. So separation of the family could stem from many places. It could be a result of marital separation, death of a loved one, incarceration, foster care, and in my own case, immigration. And one thing I want to note that separation is not easy for any child and can have like a really long lasting impact if not addressed in the most caring and compassionate way. So the thing with separation is that the family dynamic is completely restructured because of the abrupt breaking of family bonds. So you know that as you grow up as a child, you know who your parents are, you know that they're your caretakers, you know that you can trust them, and you start to establish those relationships and they grow stronger. Now, when separation occurs, those relationships are completely abruptly broken. And depending on the age of the child, right, it can affect how they interact with the world mentally, emotionally, and physically. And it could also restructure the family dynamic where the older children take on more responsibility, and that also speeds up their growth. So when you think about it, you have like a young child gaining a lot of responsibility. However, they don't have the emotional capacity at that time because they're still growing and learning about the world to handle the new situation. So there's a sort of a mismatch for a simpler way to describe it. So issues that may result from separation of the family, feelings of isolation, depression, shame, aggression, and anger due to the fact that it occurred at such a young age and they had no control over the situation. Um, some cases, there's increased crying, there's anxiety, there's the inability to express or communicate with their peers because they feel like, or in some cases, they feel like they can't communicate with their peers, that no one understands them, right? And that could also impact like school performance, which also affects like how they sleep and how they eat as well. So separation of a family is it's something that's not usually talked about, but it's very impactful in the child's development, and that could really affect how they behave as adults. So that's my answer.
Going based off what you were saying, I wanted to highlight just how kind of everyday things growing up can affect a child growing up into their adulthood. So something like communication, well, let's say a lack of communication, even at a young age, not explaining to a child what they were doing and why it was wrong, just saying, oh, don't do that. Like, no, you can't do that. You can't go there. You can't do this without giving proper explanation. It just kind of teaches a child that they're not to communicate, really. And you can see this kind of affect their relationships, whether it's friendships, whether it's potential like romantic partners later on when they're ready to, get married, whether it's even in the workplace and communicating things that aren't like don't help you and don't help you thrive. It definitely stunts somebody growing up not to be able to communicate in an effective way. Another thing I wanted to discuss was just not addressing some of the things that kids go through when it's school, whether it's growing up in their young environments. There's so much that they discuss, there's so much that they see. In this day and age, we have social media, so there's so many things that they're getting exposed to, and if you're not addressing what they're seeing and kind of debunking what they're seeing, because there's a whole bunch of different opinions going on social media, and that's kind of what they're taking in, that's what they're learning. A lot of kids aren't even capable of like fully understanding the word and fully understanding the promises that God tell us. So they're getting their information. If they're not communicating with you, they're communicating with social media, with their friend that comes from an abusive home, like from the wrong crowd. This can definitely affect them growing up. This can affect their self-esteem. I'll get specific because I feel like growing up, especially as a Black woman, you just see a lot of negative things, whether it's just on the way that we look, whether it's just our attitudes or this. You just get you learn about yourself, your beauty, what you believe in yourself from social media. And sometimes there's just a lack of like that comfort or that like from home coming, like there's just a lack in the house from maybe your parents or just people around you, like justifying that you're beautiful, saying that you're smart, you're amazing, like you're just amazing, like just giving words of affirmation. And I feel like there's a lack of that, but like too much of a negative coming from social media and around. We all know that, you know, in this country we're a minority, and they emphasize like white people, white women, white everything, or lighter skin. And I think that definitely affects. I'm speaking specifically on Black women, Black little girls. Like they grow up and they don't feel beautiful. They don't feel like they can say that. They don't feel like they're being listened to. That what they're saying matters. And it takes a lot of unlearning, and it takes like finally seeing yourself as beautiful, seeing your features that they made fun of you for, seeing it as beautiful, to really be able to let go of what you've grown up believing in yourself, and to really hold on to like the word of God, that you're beautifully made, and really walk in your fullness. So yeah, that communication that could have easily kind of helped somebody that was younger. You could have affirmed them, made them feel beautiful, made them feel worthy. And a lot of times I feel like that's not happening, and it definitely translates when they grow older.
Thanks, Crystal. So I'm going to talk about, at least for me, what I think really affected the way I ended up growing up as an adult. And that was just like, just the dangers of expectations. As I think just as either immigrant children or just children that are born in an African household, there is this expectation of you to be excellent at school. You have to have the best manners, you know, make really good friends. Like there was so much expectation, at least for me, it was, okay, you have to get the greatest grades at school. You know, whenever you see your aunties, you have to be sure to kneel down and greet them. There was like, you have to be perfect at everything that you do, because there was a fear of one, which is a valid thing, which is that, like, you know, parents don't want their children to end up as mediocre or like not successful in society. And I do understand where that comes from. But it kind of also, for us, it translates to like, oh, my parents are afraid of me embarrassing them outside. You know, there's always the parents like to brag about their kids. You know, my daughter's a doctor, my son is a this, my son is a that. And it's great. You know, I wanted to be a doctor, but I quit midway through. But that's neither here nor there. But it's really nice bragging rights for parents, but it can in turn put a lot of pressure on your children. It makes you feel like you always have to live up to these sometimes unrealistic expectations, right? And it's you kind of grow up into an adult and you still always are striving to be perfect, because that is that expectation that has been placed on you. You go, at least for me, when I would go to work, I would have to put in way more effort that wasn't even needed, because I was just so afraid of disappointing anyone, right? Even in things that I had no control over, the thought in my head is, I don't want to disappoint my parents, right? So when I wanted to change my major and not go to med school anymore, I was like, oh my God, my parents are going to be so embarrassed. They don't have a doctor in the family. Like, you know, my brother already went left and became an architect, which is not a thing that like we really talk about. And I was like, okay, so they're relying on the second. You got to be a doctor. You know, we've been talking about this since we came from Nigeria. Like, you know, when you go to the United States, you know, you're going to go to NJIT, you're going to study pre-med, and then you're going to graduate, you're going to go to Rutgers Medical School. It was just already like planned out. And I got to college. I was like, I don't like this at all. Like, I don't want to be in the hospital. Never, ever, ever. Not at all. Whether it's being sick or treating people that are sick, I don't want to do it. But because like I already knew that my parents had such high expectations of me. It took me so long to get to that place where I could make a decision that I felt that was right for me, even though I felt like I was going to disappoint my parents, right? So that expectation that parents place on their kids a lot of times prevents the kids from even doing things that make them happy, because they're like, oh, when it comes either my happiness or my parents' happiness, and it's always like you feel the need to like choose the happiness of your parents, because that's, you know, you kind of raised feeling like you have to live for your parents, you know, like, and anything you're doing is like, I want to make my parents proud, you know. Remember your parents at home, like I think Yoruba people will say like roti omo eniton jet, like remember the daughter or son of who you are. It's always like rung into your head where like you can't go astray, you can't do any of these things. Like if you make a mistake and you want to go home, it's like, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me. It just creates a fear and a barrier between you and your parents, where there should be that space where I can come on and be like, mommy, I messed up, right? You don't have that space anymore, because you know that your parents are not just going to see, oh, a child that messed up. What they see is this child is an embarrassment. So instead of building that relationship and that like space of just like comfort in the home, it just creates a home of isolation where you feel like all your parents ever tell you is how great you have to be. They don't tell you it's okay to mess up. They don't tell you that, you know, like Crystal was saying, like words of affirmation of like, okay, it's fine to be, you know, a painter if that's what you want to be. They don't tell you how like your desires matter. It's just, okay, this is what I want you to be in the future, and this is what you're going to be. And those expectations just like, they start to shape the way you see yourself as an adult, where it starts to feel like your opinions, your desires, your happiness doesn't matter. It's okay. Is my boss happy with me? Great, I'm fine. Even if I am suffering in the job, as long as my boss is happy, that's great. You know, as long as I'm making money for the house, that's great. You know, as long as everyone else is happy, that's great. And you end up with a bunch of young adults my age who are struggling now to find their own happiness, who are struggling to be the people that they want to be, because they've spent so much of their lives just trying to fulfill the expectations of parents, of families, and not trying to let anybody down. So for me, that was the biggest thing that framed the way I think. And it's now I'm kind of unlearning and just being like, you know, I'm gonna live for myself. Like it's fine if like my parents are a little disappointed. You know, I hope they're not, but if they are, it's fine as well, as long as I am making decisions that I feel like align with who I want to be as a person and what makes me happy as an adult.
That's a really great point that everyone made. I wanted to actually speak to something, Olufe, that you mentioned about, you know, happiness, and it kind of brought me to this question of like, you know, is it happiness or joy? Because I do think that more so when we're having this conversation, it's more so joy in what you do versus happiness, because happiness is a feeling, it's fleeting, it's something that, you know, comes and goes. And if you're explaining that to a parent, like, hey, this is what makes me happy, like, you know, you can be happy in doing it, but it's not going to help you along the way. So like in understanding that from the perspective of the child, it's now, okay, understanding what is at stake, which is your life, and your parents are the caretakers of said life. I think more so what's being emphasized is the joy that comes with the work that you're doing, but then you're also understanding that this is something that the Lord has given you insight into. It's not just something that you chose willy-nilly. It's not just something that you were just like, oh, I feel better doing this versus that. It's less work versus, because that's the perspective of parents. I don't want to speak on anybody's behalf, but like, you know, it just sounds very willy-nilly. But like, you know, in Nehemiah 8:10, it says, you know, the joy of the Lord is my strength, you know? So when you choose that work that, you know, has brought you joy, even in those moments where it's like, oh, I don't know, you still have the joy of the Lord in you to be able to do it, you know? And then it allows you to show your parents the fruit of that thing that you're doing. And it's almost like a reassurance for them to be able to like understand, okay, I see why now that this is, the path that you chose. But I think that's something that, both parents and children should have a conversation about, in understanding what insight from the Lord have you been able to receive about the thing that you want to do. And then Crystal and Chiamaka, some of the ideas that you've put across about separation and anxiety and communication and all those things. I mean, I was just thinking it's more of like a battle of identity and a battle of conditioning. All of these things happen in the mind for a reason, and that's why our minds are very important to God. So I think that's why, this conversation is really very important, because God cares about our minds. He cares about our mental hygiene. He cares about our identity, because he wants us to find our identity in him, and being able to understand where our identity and our conditioning lies in. So I guess as a follow-up question to everyone, I wanted to find out more about how, things that you've mentioned are things that really affect, how you grew up and how you've been able to adapt work, relationships, things like that. How can believers support each other? How can we be able to, help each other out in these situations where we may feel like nobody understands us?
That's a great question. So one of the things, as I was self-reflecting, as I was preparing, I think one thing that really impacted me is community and loving in action. So loving in action, not just in words, saying that, oh, I love you, good day, good morning, but actually tangibly reaching out to people, checking in on people, sacrificing your time, because there's so many people that really poured into my life growing up. They would take me to school. I went to a boarding school 2 hours away in high school. They would call on, they would meet with me and speak life into me and speak those words of affirmation, so that it's easier, though it was difficult at the time, but it's easier to continue to press on. So that the community really taught me, being in a loving community really taught me how to love other people as well. And one thing that I've learned in loving in action, sometimes it requires you to be still and listen. So in terms of relating with my friends, or even relating with my family, I know I'm the fixer. I love to fix things. And people on the production team, they're probably rolling their eyes and agreeing. I love to fix things. But there are some times that you really just have to stay still and listen and wait on God to give you the answer, and also listen to the person that is talking to you. Don't try to fix them immediately, but prayerfully speak with God and just prayerfully think of, communicate with God and communicate with the Spirit to approach this person in love. So that's what I mean by love in action, stepping out and also being still and listen.
I would say that I've learned to reach out to people and see what they need, how they accept love, because personally, I'm somebody, I'm more of a hands-off person. I think it's because I'm an only girl in my family. So I've I spend a lot of time by myself. So I like alone time. I love it, honestly. And sometimes when I'm going through things, I tend to isolate, and I don't even realize it, but I do. And then, I realize, okay, this is wrong. And then I have to get around people and do all that. But I just realized I had to realize that that's not how other people navigate. That's not how other people need me. That's not what they need from me. I've had friends who have come to me and said, "Oh, I didn't feel like you were here for me during this time." And mind you, I thought I was giving them space. I was checking in once in a while, but I thought I was giving them space the same way that I would want space in that moment. So it was an unlearning and realizing that every single person needs something different, and communicating what you need to that person, or even being that friend and asking somebody what they need from you, can really just eliminate confusion, can eliminate like just not making sense, not going together. I'm not sure how to say it, but it just eliminates that happening. So what I do now is like I go to my friends and I ask them what they need from me. If they need me to be more present, if they need me to check in from time to time, call them here and then. If they need me to back up, I literally have friends and that really require like so much different things. And so that's what I've just learned that everyone is different. And it's just being able to admit when you're wrong, when it comes to when you're dealing with people. I think that is obviously humility, but it shows people that you're willing to learn, that it was an honest mistake, and that they are more open to giving you another chance, being more open with you, as opposed to you kind of being like, oh, that's just the way I am, like owning when you're wrong, owning when you need to change and grow. Yeah.
So for me, I would say anyone that knows me, my biggest community is my family. They are my closest friends in the whole world. So I would say when I'm coming from a place of community, I'm just gonna speak on how like family can support someone during periods of their lives, right? So I'm just gonna give an example. I'm not gonna go too specific, but so 2 years ago, I would say I probably went through what I would consider the hardest time of my life. If there was any point where I had considered, you know what, I probably need to check myself into a mental institution, it would have been then, because I found myself like I would be crying on my way to work, get to work, put on a smile, do my work, cry on my way back home. It was days of like paralyzing fear. And I would say that like when people would say like fear can be paralyzing, I never understood it until that moment. It's like you're facing a period where it's just like I didn't know what my future held. And I just felt like I felt like I was dying under the weight of just, I don't know what future is going to be like for me. Right. And in that moment, surprisingly, my family was the only person I could turn to, because I thought like, I had really close friends. I felt like they were the people I was going to turn to. But in that moment, it was like my parents, my siblings. Like, I remember my dad had made a comment to me one day. He was like, Olufe, if you want me to fly to America today, I will fly there if it's just to give you a hug. And it just for me was like, how, like, he could have just been like, it's going to be okay, it's fine. But like the fact that he was willing to show up in whatever way I needed him to show up, to me, it was just like, this is what support looks like. This is what, like, he didn't have a solution to what I was going through. Like, he couldn't fix it, even if he tried. But he wasn't trying to fix me. Like Chiamaka said, he was just like there and being like, okay, I will listen. I may not have the answer, but I will listen. And I feel like that's one of the biggest support things that like anyone can provide to another human being, is just being there to listen, right? You don't have to have the answer. And again, you're not listening to provide a solution, right? Because I think a lot of us, like, you listen and in your head, you're just thinking about, okay, what do I want to say to this person when they're done talking, right? But it's about you just sitting, don't think about anything but what that person is saying to you. And granted, if God tells you something to say to them, that's great. But don't listen with the intention of speaking back. Just listen with the intention of just being there for that person to share their burdens. Because a lot of the times, and like, I think parents as well, I mean, obviously I'm not a parent, but I'm just assuming this is what sometimes you guys might be thinking. It's like, I want to help them. I want to fix this. what somebody's going through, right? Even if you've been through a similar situation, right? Okay, yes, I failed my class too when I was in 7th grade. Okay, but it's different. You're not me and I'm not you, right? So don't assume you know everything. Just be willing to listen and pay attention. And another thing that like my community, which is my family, really helped. And I have a family of strong spiritual people, was the fact that they didn't throw the Bible in my face, right? They weren't like, oh, Lulu, how can you be sad? Because there were moments where I was just like, you know what? I don't really feel like God has my best interest at heart. That was a statement I was telling to everyone that was around me. I was like, I just don't feel like God loves me. Knew that in that moment, after you listen to me, I'm able to be receptive to what you're telling me. But if you don't listen, I'm not receptive. I'm like, this person doesn't even hear what I'm saying. So why should I listen to you? Right. So listen, pay attention, and don't use the Bible, don't use scriptures to dismiss your children, to dismiss your friends just because you feel I feel like it's a thing of pride to use the word of God as a dismissive tool, because the word of God is there to encourage, it's there to correct, it's there to comfort. But if you're not using it the right way, and if you're not using it under the inspiration of the Spirit, the words that you're speaking don't mean anything, and they could eventually be portrayed as something different. So before you speak, make sure that the Holy Spirit is actually telling you to speak that, because the words can lose their meaning and their power because you're not even using it in the moments that you're supposed to be using it, right? So that's just my little thing. Sorry for my gang sign.
No, I actually, I really appreciate like what you were saying. I really hope it doesn't go over people's head, because I feel like sometimes, especially our spiritual, we go to a church. We've all grown up in the church. Our parents can sometimes turn into Pastor Emmanuel when you're going through a problem, and they'll start preaching to you. They'll show you different verses in the Bible.
PowerPoint.
Like, it's great. It's amazing. That's awesome. Like, but you have to trust that you raised me as a Christian. You raised me in the church that I know that God is my foundation, and I will, and that I know His promises, and I know that I can lean on them. But in this moment, like, it's not transferring. Like, what I know in the Bible, it's not transferring. And like, sometimes I just want, if not just to listen, sometimes I just want you to be real about like what you went through. If you went through a similar thing, after, of course, like you said, after fully listening to me, so that you don't cut me off, not even knowing what I'm saying, but just being real, you know, saying like, I completely understand what you're going through. That sucks. Sometimes, you know, I don't even want you to tell me, oh, you know, a long story. Just agree that the situation sucks, that it's the worst. Like, wow, I wish better for you. Like, I hope you figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and of course, as a parent, you can still pray for your child, still whatever, like you said, like when you pray, the Spirit reveals passages or just something to say to that person later on, but just not in that moment, because it doesn't feel genuine. So I definitely like a real, just a real answer. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And if I'm coming to you, so, oh, okay. Let me just say this one thing. Sorry.
Oh yeah, sure.
If I'm going through something that may be disappointing to you, just like, I guess it's just all about how you address them. Because if you go off the handles, like, what are you doing? I'm so disappointed in you. You're the worst. Like all this stuff. Then you expect that person to now come to you again, you know, when they're going through something. I get that there's levels to certain things that you do. Maybe you did something that was really bad and does, you know, it's going to require that kind of reaction. But if certain situations that, you know, I just want you to like understand me, because I know everybody, we were all young once, and we all went through things that we're not proud of. So let's not act like we're so far better and beyond who you are. Just be humble. Like, yeah, you were just like me when you grew up. You did some similar things. You probably did worse things. So maybe instead of like going off the handles, you can calm down. If you can't calm down in that moment, walk away, come back when you're good. That's just me. That's just what I'm saying. What were you gonna say, Chimaka?
I was gonna say, like, can we be real for a second? Because there'll be some cases where our parents really don't understand, and they'll try their best. Because I know, like, I can bring my parents as an example. We grew up in different cultures, right? And there'll be things that bother me that they wouldn't understand. But one thing that, like, I really appreciate is, okay, acknowledging that you don't understand, but also acknowledging that I'm here for you. So yes, you're going through this. I don't quite understand what you're going through, but I'm here for you. And when you're ready to talk, I'm here. I'm available. Because one thing I know for me specifically, accessibility is a big thing to me. Like, I want to be able to speak to my parents and have a relationship with my parents and actually dialogue with them. And they've seen it, and that's how, like, our relationship has grown. Like, we understand that you provide, and parents, you do a great job of provision, like A+ on provision. But in the same respect, we want accessibility. We want you to be there, even when you don't understand. Just like physically be there and be available, and not be so quick to, shoot 5 solutions and 17 references and calling people as well. Like, we just want you to be there. So that's one thing I wanted to throw in perspective, that your parents won't understand all the time, but in the same case, like, just please be accessible.
Oh, for sure. Those were really great points. I mean, and I just liken our relationships to, our relationship with God. Like, there are moments where God is probably looking down at us like, why did you do that? But with the loving, guidance, like those are the things that, like, make the world, like, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Right. And we're all called to live the life of love, and being able to understand. And I guess this next question, I just wanted to, get a quick response from it. But, like, if there's a parent that's just sitting here right now, right, and they're thinking, I made some mistakes, right? What then would you advise? Like, what then would you say would be? I would say 2 solutions, or 2 things that you would say that would help in guiding them in the right direction with their children.
Guide in the right direction. Well, I think it starts with you, one, before you go to your child and try to rectify. I would say take a minute to yourself to try to understand, okay, what do I think my shortcomings were, right? Because we can be saying a lot of these things, and maybe, honestly, maybe not all of them apply. Maybe you've been a good or whatever. You need to expect this magical relationship to come up, right? And you're like, oh, why does my daughter not think I'm her best friend? I'm like, of course you're not my best friend. You know what I mean? Like you don't know anything about me. So you have to be intentional about saying like, okay, God, I want to get to know this person. And then be intentional about talking to your child and saying, you know what, I know I messed up. Like Crystal said, it's okay to admit that you were wrong, right? Just tell me, I know, I wasn't there. You're 30 years old now, and I wasn't there for the past 30 years. But that's okay. And children see the intentions, right? I don't think I've met anyone that has ever been like, you know what, my parents want to be in my life, but no, I will never, unless you've done some traumatic things to your kids. Then I can't speak to that. But they see your heart and they will be receptive, especially if you have God going with you. So that's what I would say. Just think about what you really want to achieve with that relationship with your child, pray about it, and then be intentional about the steps that you take. Don't just do it passively. And if your child says no the first time, you gotta be persistent. You know what I mean? Like don't stop because you got shut down once, right? But think about it. They've been getting shut down for the past 20 years. So you just got one. So keep going until you knock down those walls. That's what I think, at least.
I would say after admitting that you're wrong and apologizing and stuff, changed behavior is the best way for me to see that you are actually sorry, and that you actually want to work to improve. When something happens between like maybe a fight or something happened that's wrong, and then the next day it's an apology. Okay, awesome, great. And then a week later, it's like another interaction that was very similar to what that was. It just shows that person that, okay, you're not really putting in the work to change. Without saying that it's manipulation, it's almost as if you are just saying sorry to say that, okay, I've said sorry, you know what I'm saying? And then let me
all righteousness. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, let's move on. Like,
Yeah.
I've said sorry. So I'm good. My conscience is clear. Like, but you're not putting in that work to really make sure that the relationship is growing and building from that point. I'm not saying that you're going to be a perfect person from that point. You might backslide here once or twice here and there, but when you like move on, look at yourself. Like, if you do something bad and you're trying to grow from that moment, you might go back and forth and act before you actually fully move past that. But you have to eventually fully move past it. It's not just like, oh, I'm chilling here. I sometimes I messed up and do those wrong things. That happens once in a while. But like, that person has to see that, look, that's who I was. I'm not that person anymore. Sometimes I mess up, but that's not who I am. And they need to know and see it to know that that's not who you are. So changed behavior really is really how you're going to really get your child to trust you and trust themselves to be vulnerable with you. Because I know that if it's continuous, if it keeps happening, they're not going to want to open up to you. They're going to be shut down. They're not going to want to connect with you because they're just waiting for the next time you go off again. They're just like, I'm sure it's going to happen soon. Like, and then we're going to be back to square one again. Like, if you want to really have your child trust you and believe that you're a changed person, that you genuinely think what you did was wrong, just change.
I mean, you all pretty much covered it. So that's pretty much my response is admit it, admit that you messed up. And actually admit it, if you have young children, start admitting it if you're not admitting it already, so that they're in the habit of also admitting their faults and that they're not like their whole world is not crushed, that their parents are not perfect 20 years down the line. When you admit that, okay, I did mess up, when you reconcile, since we are in the ministry of reconciliation, right? Jesus reconciled us to God. In the same respect, we reconcile unto each other, regardless of whether you're a parent or a child, we're reconciling as a family. So when parents start that habit early, children, especially with young children are able to reciprocate that because, young children mirror what their parents do. And then for the older adults, like you all said, it's going to be hard, to be honest. We're saying all these things. It might be difficult. You might have messed up for a long time, but don't be discouraged. And in the same respect for the child, if you see that your parent is trying, try to open up a little bit. You might get hurt, but just try to open up. Yeah, that's it. That's all I have.
Okay, cool. I mean, really great contributions. The last question is, you know, what is one thing you wish you learned earlier in your mental health journey?
All right, I can kick this one off. So one